If you're hearing this stream and it's coming through clearly, let me know and say hey in the chat. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Today's going to be interesting, okay? Because Jagmeet Singh of the NDP, it seems like he's finally sort of giving in to the idea that, hey, there's going to be an election this year, even though it seems like he doesn't really want that to happen. And this morning, it seems like he's going to actually reveal what sort of policies and what sort of plans his party is going to be fighting for in Canada. Now, even if you don't think that the NDP is likely to win an election, certainly the direction that the party that are more on the fringes are pushing in, it does give direction in terms of the policy for other parties that may be more or less likely to actually form a government here. Yeah, I'm seeing people in the chat here. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'll show you what I'm looking at here. We've got sort of like a web conference that's about to happen, and it's out of, I believe, St. John's. So Jagmeet Singh is currently in Atlantic Canada. They're just sort of waiting to start the media event right now. So I'm going to keep that up on my other browser here. And we're going to wait for the actual stream to start where he announces these things. But before we do, I wanted to take a look at a letter that Jagmeet Singh actually wrote to Justin Trudeau. And again, if you're just tuning in, hey, how's it going? Feel free to drop a like on the stream so it gets sent out to more people. And let me know where you're tuning in from in the chat. We like to attempt to get coverage from all of the different provinces and territories all across Canada. So it's sort of cool when we can complete that bingo game. But yeah, let me know how it's going. I hope you're having a good week on this Thursday morning. But let's take a look at this letter that that Jagmeet Singh actually just a couple days ago tweeted out. This is the letter that he sent specifically to Justin Trudeau. So we're going to take a look at it here. Let me actually pull up my pen so I can annotate here for you. And again, like I said, we've got this going in the other tab. So as soon as we start to actually hear this press conference, that's going to pop up in the other tab and we'll flip over to that so we can get an idea of what's going on. Awesome. Seeing people in the chat, we've got Ada and Shelly and Vanya, awesome. Toronto, Ottawa, loving to see it. Love to see it. Okay, so let's take a look at this because I actually haven't read this yet, but I think he's likely, and this is what the NDP has been doing lately, has been pushing for the idea that they don't want an election to happen right now, saying, hey, NDP, we're willing to come back and work with you to actually make things happen. If you didn't want to have an election, we'd just support all your legislation when we go back into the House of Commons. I'm not sure how clearly you can see this here, but I'll read it out for you. He wrote, Dear Prime Minister Trudeau, in recent days, you and your ministers have expressed frustration at not being able to pass more legislation. You have erroneously blamed New Democrats for your own failure to see that priority legislation pass the House of Commons and the Senate. I'm writing to remind you of the critical and constructive role New Democrats have played throughout this parliament. So that's interesting. I think he's likely referring to a couple of the bills that sort of went right up until the day before they were actually set to take their 2-month vacation here in the summer where the House of Commons isn't in session. I think one of them was about conversion therapy, and there was one other bill that I can't quite recall what the function of it was, but because those bills didn't pass, people believe that Trudeau could say, hey, we didn't get this legislation passed, we think it's super important, we're going to call an election because Parliament's dysfunctional. Yeah, hey everyone, I'm seeing some regulars in the stream. Good to see you again, Candace and Jay. I've seen you guys in here before. I love these streams because I get to know you guys individually, so always tune into these. Dawn and Brenda, Mel, amazing. Good to see you guys. I'm just going to... let me make sure that we're not missing... Yeah, you guys would tell me if we were missing it because I don't have my headphones on yet. All right, and then he goes on here saying, as early as March, my House leader wrote to the government House leader to suggest that evening sittings of the House begin immediately in order to make progress on important bills. In that letter, we noted our worry that important bills are once again being treated as political football, with the Conservatives stalling Parliament to show that the government is out of control, and the government happy to see its agenda stalled in order to justify a snap election where they would use this excuse while seeking a majority government wherein they could pass these bills without delay. Yeah, so essentially the Conservatives didn't want some bills to pass through, and the Liberals are like, hey, you know what, we can kind of use this as our excuse to go to an election, saying that Parliament is dysfunctional. And this is actually something that I recall right here when they were saying that, hey, the NDP suggested to actually extend the sittings late into the evening, and I think they did this for a while. Oh, I think we might have some
Jack Harris,
Okay, I think we might
candidate
have
pour
something
le
going on
Saint-John's
here.
Est, Marie Shortall, et candidat pour le NPD pour
Okay, let's see if
Saint-Jean
this person
Sud,
who's
Mount
controlling the
Pearl,
CPAC live
Ray
stream will
Critch.
actually
On va
fix
juste
this
attendre
view.
quelques secondes pour que tout le monde puisse se connecter en ligne avant de commencer.
Awesome. I'm seeing lots of people in the chat. Hey, Alex, how's it going? Good to see you. Nathaniel, William.
Welcome Jagmeet Singh back again
Okay,
to St.
CPAC
John's
guy. Let's
East and
fix
St.
this.
John's,
There we go.
Newfoundland and Labrador as part of his Atlantic tour. We are very pleased that he is with us. And we have, of course, as was mentioned in the intro, two very special guests here who you'll hear from Mary shortly. But Ray Critch is the nominated candidate for St. John's South Mount Pearl, and of course Mary Shortall has just been nominated.
Until we get to like the meat of it, I'm just gonna turn this down a little bit. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what policies like are going to be inside of this.
2023. And when I was elected
let's
along
hear
with
what he's saying,
Jagmeet and 24 New Democrats in the fall of 2019, we were elected for a term of office that was to end then. But there's persistent rumors that there may be an election sooner. And therefore, we're required to be ready for that. We've been very busy over the last, since the fall of 2019, fighting to make sure that the appropriate response to the pandemic was being brought forward by the government. And Jagmeet will certainly talk a little more about that now and throughout the campaign. And we're ready to continue to serve, as am I. But as you know, I've announced that I won't be running in the next election. And that's why we've proceeded to have a new selection for a nomination for St. John's East. I'm very proud to introduce Mary Shortall, who will be the next Member of Parliament for St. John's East, and ask her if she would introduce Jagmeet Singh for today's event. So thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like I was saying, like it's going to be interesting to see what policies are actually pushed here. I know there was some support for a UBI from the NDP, which is definitely a controversial. Some people love the policy, some people hate it. I'm personally of the opinion you need to wait and to see what the details are for any policy. That's one thing that I'm hoping to see from the NDP here is some continued detail when it comes to what their policies are, because you can say, hey, we want to do this thing, but if you don't actually have a solid plan, how is anyone going to feel confident that you can execute? At least that's the way I see things.
Past and present, and thank them for hosting us here this morning. I'm Mary Shortall, and I'm thrilled and so honored to be the recently nominated NDP candidate for St. John's East, and to be joined by Ray Critch, NDP candidate for our neighboring riding of St. John's South Mount Pearl. Thank you so much, Jack, for your amazing words as usual. The people of St. John's East, and indeed the entire province, have been blessed to have you in our corner for more than 30 years. Thank you all for coming out here today to hear an important message from our leader and our party. I'm here today because I know that workers and their families are struggling. They need someone in their corner fighting for them. It's been harder to keep up as wages stay the same and good jobs with benefits become harder and harder to find. Sadly, for the last 6 years, the Liberals have not done much to make life any easier for working families. Justin Trudeau wants to look like he cares. He says the right things, but when it comes to really helping Canadians, he has to be forced to provide real support. Over the last 6 years, he could have taken real action against stagnating wages, but he chose not to. Jagmeet Singh and the New Democrats are different. He has shown what it means to send New Democrats to Ottawa. The people of this riding have seen that benefit firsthand. If we want different results, we need to make different choices.
I wonder what they mean by like how like the NDP could tackle the stagnating wages, because not only are wages stagnating, but we have higher inflation now, meaning that like wages are even lower than they are like reported to be, right?
And faster. That's why I'm so excited to be here today and to introduce a fearless leader, a leader that has the courage to fight for better. Please join me in welcoming our leader, Jagmeet Singh.
Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Hopefully we get some actually solid details this time, you guys.
Thanks so much, Mary. I'm really, really honored to be here. And I want to thank Jack Harris, who's been such an incredible voice for so many people. And for the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, he's been such a fighter. I want to also thank Mary Shortle for her words today and for being our next candidate for St. John's East, and Ray Critch, who's going to be an incredible candidate for St. John's South, Mount Pearl. We know that we've been dealing with a pandemic, which has been really difficult. It's been hard on a lot of people. And while Justin Trudeau wants to just act like it's over, it's not over. And people are still worried. I want to thank everyone who's gotten vaccinated. That's a big step forward for us to be able to get past this pandemic. But people are still worried. They're worried about their kids. Today, the plan was just announced about the province's plan for kids getting back to school. I know people are worried about their kids. People are worried about their elders and a potential flu season. People are worried, and they're still concerned about what this pandemic means for them, their jobs, and their future. And if Justin Trudeau was listening to people and their concerns and their worries, he would not be holding a selfish summer election. Instead, he would be heeding our call and the call of Canadians to keep on delivering the help that people need, fighting for the help that Canadians need at this point in time. But while we've been dealing with the pandemic and the crisis of the pandemic, there are so many other crises that continue to impact Canadians, people here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I should also mention it's a great honor to be back in my childhood town, the town that I grew up in when I was a kid, spent a lot of time in my formative years. Someone mentioned maybe that's the reason why I've been able to connect with people, is because I learned from the greatest connectors, the people who have got great hospitality and warmth when I learned that here in St. John's. But while we've been dealing with the pandemic, we know there's a number of crises that are still in front of us. We know that the climate crisis is raging and people are feeling the impacts of that crisis right now. We've seen forest fires in the interior of BC and in Ontario. I spent some time in the interior and saw thick clouds of smoke that obscured the sky. You couldn't see the sun. People were struggling to breathe the air. We know that that impacts people across the world with forest fires raging around the world. We also know of flooding and intense periods of drought and heat. Climate crisis is real. And things have only gotten worse in the past 6 years. Our emissions as a nation have gone up over the past 6 years. We know that housing is at a crisis. People can't find a place to call home. People can't afford a place that's in their budget, whether to rent or to own. This crisis has only gotten worse over the past 6 years. And we know healthcare is a particular crisis that impacts the Atlantic region. I've been touring across the Atlantic provinces and I've heard from people who've told me how much they're worried. They can't get access to a doctor. They can't get the help they need. And we know that here in Newfoundland and Labrador, it's a serious crisis. But this pandemic has exacerbated, made it worse. We know that people are dealing with the mental health impacts of this pandemic, and mental health services are so difficult to access. We know that the opioid crisis hasn't gone away, and in fact, it's become worse over this pandemic, and it's even harder for people. We are losing Canadians to this crisis. These crises have only gotten worse again over the past number of years. And we know that Indigenous people, the first people of this land, have continued to face injustice. Recently here in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Innu people were completely left out of negotiations. We're not even consulted
I think he's
at
likely
all.
sort of
An
like
ongoing example
talking
of
about the issues that he's likely going to bring up some more detailed plans with here in just a
in a
moment.
country as wealthy as ours, that Indigenous people can't access clean drinking water is so shameful. The fact that this government continues to fight Indigenous kids in court is completely inexcusable. And the fact that basic human rights are not something Indigenous people can count on is something we have to be committed to fixing. And when we discovered those Indigenous children found in unmarked graves, our hearts broke, but we need to change and channel that pain into action and implement all the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. Really what's been happening, and it's sad to say, is that people are paying the price of Justin Trudeau's refusal to do the things that he promised that he would do over the past 6 years. I want folks to know we fought for you. We fought for you every step of the way in this pandemic. When people needed help, we were there. We fought to make sure CERB was there for people. We fought to double it. The Liberals wanted to start at $1,000. We fought to double that to $2,000. That meant nearly 8 million Canadians had the money they needed to stay at home and to be able to put food on the table, to stay in their homes in this crisis. We also fought hard to increase the wage subsidy, which started at 10%, which we knew was not enough to keep people employed. We fought hard to increase that to 75%. ensuring that people, millions of people, kept their jobs. The same way we fought for you and your families in the pandemic, we commit to you to fight for you moving forward in the recovery. And that's why we're laying out our vision for the future. What is a New Democrat vision? Well, we know that people are worried about the cost of this pandemic. They're worried about the cost of the recovery. We are the only party stating clearly and unequivocally the burden shouldn't fall on you and your families. It shouldn't fall on small businesses that have already struggled so much. We are going to ask the ultra rich to finally start paying their fair share and invest that into people. Imagine if we could invest those extra resources into creating good jobs to help us fight the climate crisis. We could invest in better healthcare that covered you truly from head to toe. If we could invest in fighting for justice for Indigenous people, in cleaning water, in making sure that we deliver on the services that people need. That's the choice that we have. And that's the vision that we have for Canada, making the ultra rich pay their fair share so we can invest in people. We know, and I hope you've seen, New Democrats have been fighting for you every step of the way. We know that better is possible and we are ready for better and we want to achieve that together. Donc, mes amis, on sait que la pandémie est toujours là. On est dans une pandémie, c'est tellement difficile.
As we typically do on these streams, I'll provide a little bit of commentary while we're in the French sort of portion of this, because as you might know, my French isn't as good as it once was when I was in school. But interesting, the first point he's bringing up here is that he's really pushing this wealth tax idea. Now, in my eyes, the idea of a wealth tax, like it may sound like a decent idea, and perhaps it would be in certain contexts, but actually we're gonna hop up here. The point I'm trying to make is that the wealth tax that they've actually talked about here really wouldn't grab all of that much revenue. It may have less of an impact than they sort of make it sound. Okay, I guess I can continue here. It's still French. Yeah, I made a video on this a little while ago when they were first announcing that wealth tax idea, and it wouldn't even cover most of the debt servicing costs that we have here to pay interest on the debt that the government of Canada has.
Pour régler ce problème. Et effectivement, la situation c'est causée par le fait que Justin Trudeau dit une chose et faire complètement l'opposé. Il a dit que la crise climatique est importante, mais il a exempté les grands pollueurs et continue d'avoir le mauvais bilan dans tous les pays G7. On peut faire mieux. Et une grande question qui soulève, c'est quoi notre vision pour l'avenir? Notre vision, c'est on doit s'assurer que les ultra-riches paient le juste part pour investir dans les gens. Imaginez ce qu'on peut faire si on ose ensemble, ce qu'on peut faire si on investit dans la création des bons emplois qui font face à la crise climatique, si on investit dans nos soins de longue durée, si on investit dans notre soins de santé, si on prend les priorités des gens et prend des actions concrètes pour réaliser ce que les gens ont besoin. C'est exactement notre vision, une vision pour un avenir où on s'assure que les autres riches paient le juste part pour investir dans les gens. On sait qu'on peut le faire ensemble. Et si on ose ensemble,
also the other thing with that wealth tax is
thank you so much, and I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Okay, so what? He said this is going to be an announcement.
So we will start with questions on
all of
location.
his policies.
Andrea, if you want to go ahead.
And he's just saying, hey, we're going to put in a wealth tax. That's what we're going to do.
It's one question, one follow-up.
Let's see if we get any more details from these questions.
We'll start.
Thanks so much.
Oh, let's see if we can hear this actually. They need to mic this guy up.
Thank you for the question. We know that there is no future in fighting the climate crisis unless we center that around workers. We as New Democrats, a party of workers, founded by workers, will never leave workers behind. But we know a lot of the workers in resource sectors are worried about the ups and downs, the busts and booms, the unpredictability of their jobs, and they deserve better. So we are going to commit to investing in creating jobs right now. We've spoken with workers and leaders and union members in the oil and gas sector, in resource sectors, and they need to see jobs created now, not in a distant future. So a lot of our plans, making sure we retrofit commercial buildings, industrial buildings, is a way to create jobs right now. We need to invest in renewable energy. We know that there's a direction that the world is headed. The global markets are headed, and we also know there's a reality of the climate crisis. This means we have to be serious about a plan to create good jobs that are here for the long term and that create good opportunities for work. We can do that if we make the right decisions.
Your response sounds a lot like what Seamus O'Regan said. Is your what you're going to do be different from what the Liberals have promised to do?
Well, they haven't actually done anything. The difference is we get it done. The Liberals have been all talk. What have they done actually in terms of investing in real jobs for resource sector workers in the past 6 years? We've
Then
got
tell
the
us what you're
evidence.
gonna
They
do.
haven't. I've spoken with workers
I
and
wanna
we're
know.
no better off. Our situation has not changed. They talk a big talk about the climate, but they continue to exempt the biggest polluters. They put a price on pollution, sure, which is a good step, but they exempted the biggest polluters. How does that make sense? And they haven't made the investments to create the jobs right now. And that's why people are worried. They're saying, I don't want this unpredictable future made even worse with these vague promises. Let's create those jobs now. And we're saying, let's invest in retrofitting buildings and homes, that we can do that right away. Let's invest in renewable energy, and let's create those good jobs so the workers aren't worried about an uncertain future.
What happens to the Atlantic Loop if NDP's win?
The Atlantic?
Atlantic Loop, the plan to use energy from Newfoundland and Labrador through the Atlantic provinces.
Well, we know that there is a reality that we're up against, and we got to create real sustainability for people and for workers. And so our plan is to make sure we make those investments, create good jobs, and we're no longer caught up in the volatility of the commodities market, which has meant that there's been a lot of uncertainty for workers. And we know that there's a direction the world is headed in. If we don't make those investments today, we don't make real investments today, our workers will get left behind. And I don't want that to be the case.
We're going to move now to the next question.
Glenn Whiffen from Telegram Software Network.
Hey, the first newspaper I ever appeared in was in the Telegram when I was about 6 years old, I think, or 5 years old.
Perfect. The oil and gas, offshore oil and gas sector is still a big part of the economy in Newfoundland and Labrador. And the greener economy, what's the NDP plan to transition tech workers as we move from oil and gas to a greener economy?
Well, first off, we know that these workers want good jobs, and these jobs have to be there now. And we've seen a lot of talk about this, and the Liberals haven't delivered in the past 6 years. So we're saying something really clear. Let's see those investments happen immediately. Retrofitting buildings and homes will create good jobs for those workers. We need to invest in renewable energy right now. We need to see those investments immediately. And so our plan is, we want to make sure there can be no plan to fight the climate crisis unless workers are at the heart of it, unless workers see a clear plan that lays out a path for them to have good jobs. That's what we are. We are a workers' party, and we're going to make sure workers are never left behind.
We have questions about our healthcare. Some people are calling it crisis in our healthcare system now, shortage of nurses and things. How does the NDP plan to?
Yeah, so it's a little bit interesting. Like this, like he billed this.
It's
He
no
came out on
surprise
CBC
that
last
the
night
people in Newfoundland
and said that, like, hey, tomorrow morning I'm going to make a big announcement on our policy as a party, and like the only thing he really said here was like that they're going to do a wealth tax, right? That they've been saying for months. Like, I feel like it's not really addressing the issues that people want to actually know about. He's saying wealth tax, like, hey, that's going to get us out of this pandemic spending. But even the PBO said that, like, hey, it's not going to actually get that much in terms of revenue for the government.
Directly in my own life. And so we are committed to increasing investments in healthcare broadly, but specifically one of the big gaps in our healthcare system continues to be that people get sick and they're prescribed medication to stay healthy, and they can't afford it. They simply can't afford their medication. And that's millions of Canadians. And when they can't afford their medication, what happens? We know what happens. People get more and more sick, and they end up in the emergency room. They end up having more and more worse and worse illnesses. If we can invest in universal pharmacare, that will also alleviate some of the burden on our healthcare system. People won't get as sick. People will be healthier. We won't see as many people in the emergency room, and we can make investments to improve our healthcare system. Hey there.
There's an agreement in principle right now on rate mitigation between Ottawa and the province. Does the NDP plan to stand by that current agreement?
There's no question that we need to be there for Newfoundland and Labrador. So the rate mitigation is something we support, but we think we can do more. And I mentioned healthcare. There are a lot of places where Newfoundland and Labrador need investments. Healthcare is another massive concern, and why we want to be there in a meaningful way. And we're also the only party that can back up this commitment to investing more in the people and the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, because we're the only party talking about increasing revenue, basically taxing the ultra rich, so that we can pay for the investments that people need. We are the only ones talking about doing that.
So you're saying some of that investment or the taxing the ultra rich, that would go towards some of the rate mitigation?
Well, I'm saying that we need to see more than just rate mitigation. We need to see investments in healthcare. We need to see investments in building more affordable housing. We need to see investments in making life better for people, like making life more affordable. And we're the only party with a plan to actually afford to do that, because we're saying we're going to tax the billionaires and millionaires who get away with not paying their fair share, who get away with using offshore tax havens to hide their profits, who have companies like Amazon that make record profits in Canada that pay virtually no tax here. We're the only ones saying we're going to make
their
sure they pay
entire
their fair
platform
share,
the
so
wealth
we can
tax?
invest that into the needs of the people.
They just say like we're gonna be able to do everything because we have a wealth tax now. Like, is that what I'm hearing right now?
The so-called Singh surge kind of fizzled out on you last time. You ended up in fourth place. So what are you going to do differently this time to try to break through in areas such as Toronto and win back seats in places like BC and Quebec?
When I was a kid here in St. John's, I learned something really important. You never take people's support for granted. You got to earn their trust. You got to earn it by fighting for it. And so what I've done throughout this pandemic, what our team has done is we've shown people what you get with New Democrats. We are there for you. In what has been one of the worst crises that our country has faced in a generation, what has the Conservative Party done for people? What have they done to make your life better? They can't point to a single victory they fought for and won to make people's lives better. In the worst crisis that we face in a generation, it's a pretty dismal record. And the Liberals wanted to do the minimum. They wanted to, first of all, they wouldn't bring in CERB. We fought to bring it in. And then they wanted to bring it in at $1,000. We doubled that to $2,000. That was New Democrats. They wanted to bring the wage subsidy at 10%, which would not have saved any jobs. Workers tell us that all the time, that we were only able to continue to work because the wage subsidy was at 75%. We saved millions of jobs. So we want to earn the trust of the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, the people of the Atlantic region, and of all Canada by showing we have fought for you in this pandemic and we will continue to fight for you. We don't take your votes for granted. We don't assume that you'll just vote for us just because of our party. We want to earn that trust, earn that vote by fighting for you now and in the future.
Much of your platform sounds remarkably similar to 2019 and things you've already announced. If it didn't get you the votes and the seats you wanted last time, how do you think it's going to work for you when an election is called?
I think that the things that we called for in 2019 have only become more and more important. Healthcare has always been an important thing for people. This pandemic has exposed the problems in our healthcare system, has exposed that we were not prepared for a pandemic, and it showed that there's been a massive gap in the investments we need to make sure healthcare is there for people when they need it. We know that pharmacare is something we campaigned on. We know that people need to have access to medication. That only became worse in the pandemic. People lost their jobs, many people lost their benefits, and it shouldn't be this gamble that if you've got the right job at the right benefit, you get your medication covered, but if you don't, then you're left out high and dry. So those same commitments are even more important than ever. We committed to build affordable homes that people can actually afford, that are in their budget. That has become even more of a crisis. So a lot of the things that we talked about before, we knew were concerns, have only become worse. And we are committed to making them better for people, for workers, and for their families.
My name is Sarah. I'm with Canadian Press. I'm wondering,
Hi there.
in your plan or in the NDP's plan, what are, if you could sum up the overarching theme in one or two words, what would they be?
Tax the ultra rich to invest in people. That's our plan. And really, no other party is willing to say those words. And really, if that is not the plan, if it's not going to be that the billionaires pay their fair share, we have seen what happens. Governments have done one of two things. Either they cut the help that people need, or they put the burden back on the very same workers and families and small businesses that suffered. We are the only ones saying it does not have to be that way. If we make the ultra rich pay their fair share, we can invest in the things that people need.
I also wanted to ask you, what, building on Chris's question, what do you think is different about the plan this time around than in 2019?
This time around, we've got a track record. We can really point to some concrete victories that we have fought for and won that made people's lives better. People in this country are better off because New Democrats were there. There's no argument about that. Canadians are better off because we fought to make sure the wage subsidy was higher. By doing that, we saved millions of jobs. We would have also made sure that the wage subsidy didn't go to a company that exploited it, or that offshore jobs, or that increased executive pay, or that paid out dividends. That's what we would have done differently. But we were able to save millions of jobs. We were also able to keep people that were struggling in their homes so they can afford to pay their bills and afford to put food on the table. We can show in a real concrete way that millions of Canadians are better off because New Democrats were there for them. And I want you to know that we also need to look forward. And if we're left to just 4 more years of Justin Trudeau, he's going to say a lot of great things in a campaign, which he often does, and then not deliver, and people are going to end up being hurt. We want to make sure we deliver on these things. And we know the only way to do that is to make sure the ultra wealthy pay their fair share. And that's something that no one else is willing to talk about, and we are committed to doing.
Brian Callahan with the OCM.
Hey, yes.
I just want to go back to Kellyanne's question. You briefly touched on rate mitigation agreement in principle, but just specifically, judging by the agreement we've seen, does the NDP fully support this particular agreement specific to the rate mitigation?
Well, the major problem with the rate mitigation, the reason why I've been raising concerns is that some of the most impacted are the Inuit people that were completely left out of this negotiation. So that's my major problem. It's again another example of this Liberal government saying that Indigenous people are the most important relationship, but then completely failing to have any sort of work with, consultations with Indigenous people. So that's a major concern. The principle, though, of stepping in and providing support for Newfoundland and Labradorians so that they don't have to worry about bearing the burden of increased price of electricity, absolutely. That principle, New Democrats believe we need to be there to step in and find a way to support. But the current approach of the Liberal government is one I'm concerned with, and that's why I've raised concerns, but absolutely being there financially to support people and their lives and the affordability in their lives, no question.
And just on a light note, we've mentioned a few times your childhood here. Can you just give people an idea where you grew up, where you went to school, and that sort of thing?
Sure, yeah. I would say the biggest part of my childhood, I lived right across the street from Bowring Park, which there is some debate in my household if it was called Boring Park or Bowring Park.
Yeah, so a little bit underwhelming here in terms of like the plan that we're actually seeing. He sort of built this like, hey, like I'm going to lay out my whole platform, and he's just saying we're going to do the things we want to do by having a wealth tax. He emphasized that they want to bolster healthcare. They've committed to building more affordable homes. I think he announced 500,000 homes, but again, not too many details on how they're going to do that. I know that they're also pro-housing co-ops, but the idea of having this wealth tax, while it sounds good and while I want to see more details on it, when you think about it, like wealthy Canadians and wealthy companies are the ones who know how to work around some of these taxes and take advantages of the way that these codes are written. So unless we actually see some sort of major tax overhaul, if you like they said the tax is going to be on Canadians with over $20 million in net worth, and they have to give 2% of that. I believe that's what the plan was, if I recall, from a couple months ago when they announced that. Well, likely Canadians with that $20 million of net worth, well, you can pretty easily move that net worth around and potentially hold it in your business, and potentially not show that as something that would like allow your family to be taxed at this additional 2% rate. When already, like, if you have a high income, you're being taxed like essentially like half or more of that. So yeah, interesting stuff. Let's hear this next question.
Start with Alex Bilingual with the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Now we're on to national questions. That was just local questions from people actually.
Hey, good morning
in St.
or good
John's.
afternoon, maybe over there. Not sure what time it is now, but thanks very much for taking our questions.
Thanks. Afternoon, but definitely thanks.
Afternoon, good afternoon. Yeah, so just on the idea of raising revenues from raising taxes on the ultra wealthy. Obviously, the federal government has this massive deficit right now. This document of commitments we've laid out today has a bunch of expensive promises in it, new programs. How sure are you that the taxes that you would raise, the revenues you would raise through raising these taxes would cover all these new programs and also be able to handle I assume you'd want to decline the deficit over the long term, like the other parties. How would you manage all that? How confident are you that these tax increases would raise enough revenue for all of that?
I really appreciate the question. To put it really bluntly, no other party can make any commitment to invest in people without either cutting existing services or putting the burden back on people. We're the only ones with a plan that says it doesn't have to be that way. By laying out a plan to close the loopholes, to put in a wealth tax, to make sure companies like Amazon are actually paying their fair share, we are the only party with a credible plan to actually invest in people. And so there will be investments made. And we know that there are some crucial things we've got to invest in, but we're the only party talking about how we can pay for it by making the billionaires pay their fair share for once.
And I just wanted to go back to, I know a version of this question was asked, but you took a very similar platform into the 2019 election and you guys lost 15 seats. You were saying much of the same things. It was framed the same way. The pitch was very similar: raise taxes, expand healthcare. I know you're saying that these things have become more important in your view, but how do you convince Canadians that saw the same thing on the menu last time and didn't vote for you that they should choose these items on the menu this time?
Sometimes you look at items on the menu and you say, you know what, maybe I should have bought that thing last time. And that's what we're hoping people realize, that all the things we talked about are the things that people need now more than ever. Like it's not no exaggeration to say every single crisis that has happened in addition to the pandemic has only gotten worse. The climate crisis has gotten worse. We know that the housing crisis has gotten worse. The healthcare crisis has become worse. On every front, these things have gotten worse. We are worse off. Less Canadians can afford their medication. Our healthcare is struggling. And these things have happened because of bad decisions over the past 6 years. And we know there's a way forward. And I am really, really hopeful and optimistic about that. I know if we made these better choices, we would get better results. People would be better off. And so I'm committed to that. I know that people deserve better. I know that better is possible. And I'm laying out a vision for how we can achieve that. A vision that I believe in strongly. And I know Canadians want to see. They want to see some hope. It's been a pretty dark time. People want to see some hope. And here's a path forward. We know that the billionaires of this world are not paying their fair share. They're spending time up in space, going on luxury rides on rocket ships. People want to see them pay their fair share so we can invest in the things that people need. And that's what we're going to do.
Nous allons maintenant à Juliane Lapointe avec Radio-Canada. C'est à vous.
It seems like there's actually they released an additional document with more details on some of their plans. So once this press conference is done, I think if I can find it here, we're going to dive into that. Get a little bit more detail.
Désolée pour ça. Donc, j'aimerais vous entendre sur le passeport vaccinal. Le gouvernement Trudeau qui a annoncé qu'il va y avoir ce passeport vaccinal pour les voyageurs canadiens. J'aimerais savoir ce que vous en pensez. Est-ce que vous croyez que ça va assez loin? Est-ce que c'est une bonne approche?
Je pense qu'on doit avoir un tel système qui fonctionne à travers le pays, pour un système national. Pourquoi créer un document seulement pour les voyageurs internationaux? Pourquoi pas avoir ce même document qui fonctionne à travers le pays? À ce moment, je suis ici dans les provinces atlantiques. J'ai eu besoin de montrer ma preuve que j'étais vacciné quand j'ai visité l'île Prince-Édouard. J'ai aussi dû montrer la preuve à Nouveau-Brunswick.
Okay, so I'm reading a couple articles here that say that they've actually released like a 115-page document. I'm currently looking for that. So if you're watching this stream on your computer and you can find, it's called Ready for Better. Apparently it's a 150-page plan. If you can find it, drop the link in the chat because I'm having a little bit of difficulty finding it. Maybe we can sort of crowdsource this and we can go over it together.
Pour les événements, comme on a entendu au Québec, ils ont annoncé qu'ils vont faire quelque chose de similaire pour avoir accès aux certains événements. Pourquoi pas avoir...
It seems like there's actually like a fair amount of other things in it. Mental health supports, some things on housing, changes to like have a 30-year mortgage. We'll get into that soon.
Absolutely, we should have. I mean, the idea of, so the Liberal government is proposing a document that proves that you're vaccinated only for international travelers. Why not have that document accessible to Canadians so they can travel across Canada? I already just recently traveled into a number of provinces where we had to show proof of our vaccination just to enter. And I think that's a great idea. Why not then make that document available federally, produce it quickly and rapidly so that Canadians can use that in travel across our country and within our provinces and within the territories? It makes sense. And the federal government should step up and deliver a document like that that can be used in Canada, not just for traveling internationally.
Maintenant, il y a quand même des provinces qui sont contre. On pense à l'Ontario, l'Alberta, sont contre un passeport vaccinal pour usage domestique. Est-ce que vous croyez que le gouvernement fédéral devrait imposer ce passeport-là, même pour les provinces qui n'en veulent pas?
La décision d'avoir un critère d'être vacciné pour entrer les prémices, c'est la juridiction des provinces. Mais ce que je dis, c'est le document pourrait être livré par le gouvernement fédéral pour aider les provinces qui font ces décisions ou pour aider les voyageurs. Si je suis en Ontario, je veux voyager au Québec, mais je n'ai pas un document parce que ce n'est pas nécessaire en Ontario, ça crée un défi pour les gens qui veulent voyager dans les autres provinces où il y a ce besoin ou cette nécessité.
Yeah, so I'm just looking here. I'm only finding news articles that are having the other details. I wonder if they just sent this out to the press or if there's actually a way we can find this better, ready for better platform. $10 a day childcare, reintroducing 30-year terms to Canadian or CMHC insured mortgages, creating at least 500,000 units of affordable housing. Whoa, something on, they have a guaranteed livable income for all Canadians is listed inside of this.
We'll now go to Mary Brooke.
A price cap on cell phone bills, continuing wage and rent subsidies for small business as the pandemic continues. Okay, we got to find this document so that we can dive into this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to get through the last year and a half, this difficult pandemic, a lot of seniors took the CERB and then CRB if they were self-employed. And now they're finding out, like just with letters in the last few weeks, that they've lost their guaranteed income supplement if they were relatively low income. And so that immediately made a challenge to pay rent or even groceries for some of them. So I'm just wondering if this can be corrected quickly before there is an election. Otherwise, some of these people may have to go to the end of the year before legislation can change this.
I really appreciate this question. We've actually written a letter demanding this change immediately. Just to highlight what's going on for folks that don't know, what's happening is literally horrible. We've got Justin Trudeau that's going after vulnerable seniors. People that receive GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, are among some of the most vulnerable seniors, some of the poor seniors. And what Justin Trudeau is basically doing is clawing back the GIS from these seniors. And at the same time, we've got hundreds of large corporations that took public money that we clearly can prove paid out dividends to their shareholders, meaning they didn't need to take that money in the first place. So Justin Trudeau's letting those companies off the hook. They're not getting any letters in the mail saying they've got to repay the public money, the millions and millions of dollars that they took. But a senior that needed CERB to get through this pandemic is getting a letter saying they're going to have their GIS clawed back. That is just offensive. It's so wrong. And we wrote a letter to say that this has to be reversed immediately. But it really lets you know what Justin Trudeau is all about. Like, why would he allow seniors to see their vital resources being cut, but allow some of the wealthiest companies to continue to have taken public money and not pay that back?
And in your vision document, it covers a wide range of things. What's the most important, or a couple of things in there that you feel you'll pull votes from people who didn't vote for you before? What will appeal to them?
I appreciate the question. I think the main thing is, we want to really highlight that we're going to make sure that the ultra rich, the billionaires and millionaires, pay their fair share so we can invest that into people. And the invest into people, healthcare is key. We know that mental health has been really stretched thin, and lots of folks have talked to me about how they can't access mental health, and we want to make that a priority. We know that long-term care continues to be a big worry. We know the climate crisis is so urgent, and we can create good jobs that help us fight this crisis. So those are some of the big highlights. Housing is probably one of the biggest concerns I hear from everyone, from all walks of life, all income levels, and all parts of our country, remote, rural, Indigenous communities. Housing is really important. And the only way we can afford to pay for these really important investments is by making the ultra-rich pay their fair share. And we're committed to doing that.
Nous allons maintenant à Catherine Lévesque avec la presse canadienne. C'est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Bonjour.
Mon collègue avait une excellente question tout à l'heure.
Yeah, so I'm looking on their site here, and it seems like there's a lot of talk about this new plan, but I can't find the full document. They say it's called Ready for Better, and that's their document that has it. They do have like an ndpa.ca/commitments page that it seems like they go into a little bit more detail, but it seems like they're trying to here just until this French finishes up. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. This is the page that it's on. They say this is their commitments for Canadians page, and they talk again a lot about this Ready for Better plan. And so it seems like they actually did release more than what they just said in this press conference. Making life more affordable for everyday people, building a better economy that works for more people, protecting the environment, taking care of each other better. We're going to find out what all this really means. Reconciliation in action, a new deal to build stronger communities, the courage to do what's right. I'm not sure if download our full list of commitments. Oh, we could have found it right here, gang. Okay, yeah, perfect. We're gonna go into this in a moment. Here's the plan. Finally, you think they make it more obvious on their page, don't you? Oh my goodness. And so we are going back to this.
Les logements sociaux, etc. Si je me mets à la place de monsieur, madame, tout le monde, ça peut devenir un peu mélangeant là, entre les engagements du NPD et du Parti libéral. Je me demandais comment est-ce que vous allez faire en sorte que les électeurs soient capables de faire la différence entre votre parti et le parti qui est au pouvoir actuellement?
Une simple différence. Les libéraux, Justin Trudeau dit beaucoup et fait rien, ou effectivement ne prend pas les gestes nécessaires pour régler les problèmes. Et avec les grands problèmes dans la vie des gens, la situation s'empirait depuis que Justin Trudeau était le Premier ministre. La crise climatique s'empirait depuis les 600. C'était plus mauvais, c'était pire, la situation était pire. Avec le logement, la crise du logement, la situation était pire. Je demande la question aux gens, depuis les 600 que Justin Trudeau était au pouvoir, est-ce qu'il a rendu votre vie plus abordable, oui ou non? La réponse sera non, parce qu'il n'a pas agi. La différence, c'est on est prêt pour prendre les gestes concrets. On a un plan crédible pour taxer les ultra riches, pour payer pour les investissements, pour aider les gens. Et avec toutes ces promesses, notre différence, notre bilan pendant cette pandémie, c'était on a montré la preuve, on a forcé le gouvernement de doubler les PCU, d'augmenter la subvention salariale, de mettre en œuvre.
Okay, so I'm seeing a lot here in this plan. So like let me read you some of these headlines from, or like these sort of points from the table of contents here. They're talking about housing, medicine for all, affordable post-secondary education, better services all Canadians can rely on, changes to EI, livable income, like a guaranteed livable income, otherwise UBI.
Hi.
Let's see what they're talking about.
Focused on connecting with young Canadians, engaging with them on social media in lots of different ways. And this new document, one of the things it outlines how you would lower the voting age to 16. But I'm wondering, can you just go over some of the other things in this new commitment document that will help young Canadians especially?
Absolutely. We've heard a lot of young people that talk about the worries that they have about the debt that they've graduated with. A lot of young people are graduating with massive debts. I think about when I went to law school, at the time, my tuition fee was $8,000 a year, and now law school often is over $30,000 a year. It's expanded astronomically. The debt is really difficult. So we had started off very clearly saying we should not be charging any interest whatsoever on student debt. The federal government should not be charging that. But we also want to go beyond that to debt forgiveness. That's really going to help out a lot of students by forgiving their debt. We know that young people are worried about the future. They're worried about the impacts of the climate crisis, and we are committed to fighting that climate crisis like we really want to win it by creating good jobs. And that's something that speaks to young people. Young people tell me often about their worries about mental health and the fact that young people, I think, have been really hard hit by this pandemic in a way that's impacted them much more than many other demographics. Young people have felt the pain of this pandemic, and it's impacted their mental health. So we are committing to expanding our healthcare to include mental health. Cell phone and internet fees, the costs have gone up and have been really expensive. We're talking about how to make that more affordable for everybody, but that's definitely going to help young people and everyone who needs now the internet to access everything in our lives, from our work to school to our services. We're committed also to making sure people have a home that's in their budget, a place to call home that they can actually afford. That's something that a lot of young people can't imagine right now. They can't imagine ever finding a place to rent, let alone to own. And we know that we can make things better by investing really massively in building those homes that people can actually afford. And so those are some of the things I think will speak directly to young people and their hopes for the future.
Great, thank you. And just as a follow-up, how optimistic are you that young voters will show up to the polls for the NDP? And could you outline a few of the ridings maybe where you think that youth vote could really make a difference for the party?
Certainly, I'm going to put it out here right now. I am confident, 100% confident, young people will make history in this next election. We have seen young people always, historically, at the forefront of social justice movements, of fighting for justice, fighting for fairness. Young people have always been at the forefront. And we've seen it recently in the past number of years with the climate crisis. Young people took to the streets in big marches. With Black Lives Matter movements, people took to the streets demanding justice. With the Indigenous justice movement, we've seen young people take to the streets. So I am confident young people will make history, and young people will make history in ridings across this country. Everywhere across this country will see their impact.
Nous allons maintenant à la dernière question. Now we're going to the last question. Ça sera avec Hélène Buzetti avec l'École de l'information. C'est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Singh. J'aimerais revenir à une question qu'un de mes collègues a posée sur le passeport vaccinal. Corrigez-moi si je me trompe, mais vous aviez vraiment l'air de parler.
Okay, so yeah, I'm taking a look at this too. I know some people are looking at the same document that I am here, and we're going to pull it up on screen as soon as this press conference is done. It seems like this is going to be the last question. But yeah, there's a lot in here. It is very deep in terms of what their plans are. But again, as I think Alex pointed out and some other people pointed out, there's not a lot in terms of like hard data, and it seems like they're sort of waiting in order to actually determine how they're going to pay for things, what their exact plans are on how they're going to implement some of these things. But this is like a big document, and we're gonna dive into it a little bit here. Probably spend about 15 minutes going over some of the highlights, and then if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because I'll do a summary of this document and some of the things that most people are interested in, like the livable income, the housing portions of it, things that we cover here on the channel.
Pour quelqu'un qui veut voyager au Québec, qui vive des murs
I'll actually pull it up here while he's still in his French portion. But take a look at this list, you guys. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. I'm gonna scroll through this, take a look at it, and let me know. Like, we're gonna look at maybe 2 or 3 of these before we call the end of the stream. So take a look at some of these headlines and let me know which ones you want to hear more about and have us go through together here on the stream. These are all the headlines of the things that they want to worry about. Like we have the livable income thing, affordable childcare, likely some stuff about housing here, supports for workers, changes to EI. This is the full list of things that they're talking about. So yeah, take note of what you're seeing here, and let me know in the chat what you wanna go over a little bit more deeply. Working together for safer communities, building infrastructure. Right. Our fiscal approach, that's going to be interesting. Kickstarting the economic recovery and delivering the help people need now, revenues through new fair and progressive sources. Okay. Okay, is that the end of the table of contents? Yeah, all right. So yeah, take note of some of those, and we're going to dive into those. I think that this might be it, though, for the stream, at least for the live stream from Jagmeet.
Mais aussi, je comprends l'importance des droits collectifs. Pour bâtir une meilleure société, on prend souvent des décisions qui sont avantageuses pour la collectivité, pour nos intérêts, pour le bien commun. Et c'est une de mes valeurs. C'est pourquoi je veux investir dans les soins de santé, par exemple, parce que je crois fermement, si on prend soin les uns des autres, on crée une meilleure société. C'est important, c'est mes valeurs. Donc, je suis ouvert parce que je pense qu'on peut trouver une façon de d'avoir un équilibre entre ces deux demandes, mais c'est important toujours de penser de bien commun, comment on peut créer une société plus sécuritaire et comment on peut protéger la population. Ça, c'est important. Et avec la question des vaccins mandatoires, oui, je suis ouvert à cette question parce que pour plusieurs milieux de travail, c'est essentiel d'être vacciné et c'est important qu'on est ouvert à cette question et cette recommandation. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. This concludes our press conference. Ceci met fin à notre conférence de presse.
Okay, well,
Bonne
there we
journée.
go. That's the end of the NDP conference. So let's pull this up. We're gonna go. Oh, that's actually the wrong article. Let me pull. Where is it? Where did it go? Aha, here it is. Boom. Okay, so we're gonna dive into some of the ones that you guys have requested here. I'm seeing people talking about what their UBI plan is. I know a lot of people are in favor. Like, it's a very controversial policy. Lots of people strongly in favor of it. Lots of people strongly against it. So that's why I like to cover it here on the channel with sort of no judgment on whether it's good or bad. At least from my perspective, just bringing you the information here. But let's dive into that here. And likely you're gonna see a video from me about this for the people who aren't able to tune into the live stream or the people who need to take off early. So we'll start with a livable income when you need it. Let's see. Okay, so they're saying for far too long, Liberals and Conservative governments have told Canadians that the real income safety net that keeps people out of poverty is impossible. They've chosen to hand out tax breaks to big business while underfunding the programs that people rely on when they're older, when they lose a job, or when they can't work because of a disability. This is sort of a direct shot at the whole GIS business that's going on right now. They're trying to frame it like the Liberals are taking the GIS away, and we're going to see how they're going to handle that. They haven't really responded to that letter yet. As we grapple with the fallout of COVID-19 pandemic, too many Canadians are living on the edge or sliding deeper into poverty. Even when the economy recovers, it's clear that those who are struggling now will be at a disadvantage for a long time to come. We need big ideas to confront the challenges our country is facing. New Democrats believe that this is a critical moment to strengthen our social safety net and to improve income supports so that all Canadians can live in dignity and security. We know that when we invest in meaningful income supports, it gives people a chance to live full and healthy lives. Okay, they're talking about the CERB a little bit. With the CERB, we have seen what's possible when governments mobilize to make a livable income a priority. But unlike the Liberals, who moved quickly to cut these benefits, you might remember they've cut the CRB down to $540 per 2-week period, down from the $900 that it was previously. New Democrats won't stop there. We'll get to work right away building towards, okay, no details on exactly what this looks like, a guaranteed livable income for all Canadians. So yeah, like it's tricky. We're going to go over the rest of this, but it's tricky when it comes to like talking about these big, broad policy ideas. It's one thing to have the idea. It's another thing to actually like have the plan for how it's going to be implemented. I personally don't feel comfortable voting for a policy or a party that supports a policy if I don't know how it's going to be laid out, because we say it on the channel all the time, the devil's in the details. They say, we'll start this work immediately by lifting every senior. Actually, I'll do this so you can see. By lifting every senior and person living with a disability out of poverty. Okay, so I guess they want to only start the UBI for seniors and people with disability and build from there until every Canadian can count on a basic livable income when they need it. This will be completed or complemented by bold new investments in housing, healthcare, post-secondary education, and training to set all Canadians up to succeed. In time, NDP will work to expand all income security programs to ensure everyone in Canada has access to a guaranteed livable basic income. Making the creation of a guaranteed livable basic income a priority will strengthen our social safety net and finally ensure dignity, security, and peace of mind for everyone in Canada. Okay, so interesting. They're coming out 100% in support of a sort of UBI-esque thing, but some important things to note. They're calling this a guaranteed livable income, not a universal. So the difference being universal would be qualifications be damned. We're handing out all of the same amount to everybody. A guaranteed livable income would likely be income tested, right? So once you make above a certain amount, you lose the guaranteed livable income. The issue with that in some cases, again, the devil's in the details. We need more details before we can start thinking about is this good or is this bad? But if you have like a hard cap on income before you lose a benefit, well, does that in some ways disincentivize people from trying to push and earn more for themselves if all of a sudden they make it over this sort of like imaginary line threshold and all of a sudden their income drops like $30,000? Well, it doesn't give you that much of an incentive to push and build a business or to earn more money above that point, unless you're earning like 30,000 or more above it, because that's the amount you lose. Again, these are all hypothetical numbers, but I think you understand my point. Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they roll this out and what their idea is. Oh yeah, so I see some people asking where's the site to read that. This site, go to the NDP's website. I think it's ndp.ca. There's a tab that's called commitments under more. You go more commitments and then scroll down. It'll have some like big headlines, and then there's a button that you can click that says download our full list of priorities or our full list of commitments. So that's how you can find this document that we're looking through. I actually did want to go back and take a look at what they have to say here about the changes to EI that they want to make, because that was right above this, making employment insurance work. Okay, so man, there's a lot of content in here. I'm gonna, this is something that I've been putting less videos out on the channel because it seems everyone's been taking a break from like putting out news and stuff when it comes to this political stuff. But hey, maybe things are picking up here, and I'll get back to putting out a video a day like I was during a lot of the pandemic. So, okay, changes to EI. When a crisis hits, let me make this a little bigger so you can follow along. When a crisis hits, working families need to be able to count on EI to be there for them, but as we've seen throughout COVID, this system's out of date, underfunded, and not flexible. Although all workers pay into EI, even in normal times, less than 40% qualify for the benefits when they need them, even though they're paying into it. Only a third of unemployed women can access it, and that's a troubling trend. For decades, liberals and conservative governments have used EI funds to balance the books, while fewer and fewer workers can access the benefits. The Conservatives wanted to make changes to EI that would hurt others. Liberals have tinkered at the edges rather than improving the system for all. The changes they made to EI are temporary and won't fix the underlying problems. That's something that when we were covering the new EI bill, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, that was something that the NDP were causing a stink about, saying like, hey, like we support like this extension of like loosening the eligibility requirements so that more people can apply in, but why aren't we actually making these like bigger changes, right? Why aren't we like actually making some broad changes to the EI program that was designed like decades ago, right? To help make ends meet while on EI, we'll create a low-income supplement so that no one who is relying on EI regular or special benefits to stay afloat receives less than $2,000 a month. Interesting. Okay. That's interesting. Particularly in the midst of a global health crisis, New Democrats know that there are circumstances where people leave a job voluntarily but still need support, right? Because you don't qualify for EI if you quit in most cases. That's why we'd make EI available to people who quit their jobs to go back to school, to provide necessary childcare, or to protect their health or the health of immunocompromised family members. Okay, that's kind of COVID specific. How would that like translate long term? For many Canadians who need EI when they're dealing with an illness, the current system falls far short and doesn't provide the kind of help people actually need. To make sure that Canadians can count on EI when they're dealing with a serious illness, the NDP government will extend the sickness benefits from 15 to 20 weeks. It's actually 25 now. So interesting they say 15 because they actually just made that change, I think, right? They just made it up to 26 weeks or 25 weeks to 50 weeks and create a pilot project to allow workers with episodic illness and disabilities to access EI sickness benefits a day at a time as they need them. Oh, okay, interesting. Instead of having to apply like for like a long duration of time and have that be a long process, you could do it like on one-off days depending on the illness. These are some of the changes like that there needs to be conversation about because it's definitely an old system that is very clunky, especially in my time sort of covering it. NDP also understand that seasonal workers, extra 5-week pilot project to make the seasonal workers permanent. Okay, parental leave should be available for all Canadian families. Not many Canadians can live off 33% of their salary. We're going to bring in a new special leave that allows parents to take shorter parental leave at a higher replacement rate. Okay, so like a shorter parental or mat leave at a higher pay rate. Okay, interesting. Self-employed workers to opt into parental benefits at any time before taking the leave and move to double leave for parents of multiples. Finally, we will also protect the EI operating account and loss so future governments can't raid it for general revenue. A big criticism saying they're using some of these funds that have been set up for certain Canadians and that they've been paying into to balance budgets. Premiums which are currently at historic lows will be frozen until the economy recovers. Okay, interesting stuff. There's actually a lot more content in here. I'm a lot less underwhelmed. People who have been on here for the whole stream know that when we were just covering that press conference, I didn't know this document. I was like, what the heck, NDP? You're gonna come out here with just saying we're gonna do a wealth tax to pay for a bunch of things and that's all the detail. But it looks like we actually have some detail here. Interesting stuff. Let me go back to this table of contents so that you guys can let's cover one more thing. So we're taking requests, folks. We're taking requests. What do you see here that you want me to cover? I'm gonna dive into this a little more deeply and produce some content for you to have a better idea. But take a look at this. We went over the livable income, the employment insurance changes. Affordable post-secondary education could be one that people are interested in. Let me know in the chat what you want to cover here before we call this stream quits. More accessible job training and lifelong learning, supports for small businesses, a new deal for tax fairness, climate change. I'm interested in housing. If you don't know, I work also as a realtor in the Greater Toronto area, so I like to know what their ideas are on housing, because that's an interesting challenge right now all across Canada, really. Investing, building new infrastructure. Where's their housing stuff? Did anyone see it here? Maybe I'm just missing the mark here. Yeah, taking requests, Alex. Yes, post-education. Yeah, let's see. I think that they talked about a sort of a debt forgiveness sort of thing. That's something that Biden was promising too. I don't know if that actually went through in the States. Affordable post-secondary education for all. Susie, will seniors get UBI? Well, I mean, that's who they said they'd prioritize first if they were to be elected. Again, these are all sort of just promises. As we've seen with certain promises from the Liberal government, you can't really count on any government to really implement things until you actually see the legislation, have it in your hands, and watch it go through the House of Commons. But I guess we'll see. Okay, so accessible publicly funded education is a great source of opportunity, We believe that access to education should never depend on how much money your parents make or how much debt you can carry. If you have the grades and drive, you should be able to study at any age in every community. They're committed to ensuring that every Canadian has lifelong access to publicly funded education. Lifelong access to publicly funded education, meaning that's childcare and early years education through university and college. So totally public college and university. Is that what they're saying here? We've seen that in some other more left-leaning countries in Europe. But today, too many people are being denied access to education. They have to put their futures on hold, and young people are struggling under the weight of crushing student debt. Tuition certainly has gotten dramatically up. Especially given the wages that people can expect after getting a bachelor's degree. It's almost like you have to get a master's to get a decent entry-level job these days. These barriers have been set up by the Liberals and Conservatives. They've allowed these costs to balloon. There's no end in sight for that. And they've continued to profit by offering loans that have interest. Hundreds of millions of dollars per year. Liberals and Conservative governments have chosen to make life harder for students, young people, and their families. Well, what are you going to do about it, NDP? Let's see. Today, the average student with debt owes $28,000 at the end of the undergraduate degree, and they'll end up paying $10,000 more than a student who's lucky enough to be able to graduate without taking on debt. I guess that's talking about the interest costs, right? Students are also more likely to be in low-wage, precarious work that has been impacted by the pandemic, cutting off a critical source of income. That was a big issue, right? Like less summer jobs. How are people going to be able to pay? They have to take on more debt to continue their education. Okay, so it's not equal. Our vision is that for every Canadian to have access to this post-secondary education, regardless of their income. They want to make post-secondary education part of our public education system. That is a huge, huge, huge deal and a huge undertaking. I hope that I hope that this isn't the only document before a potential election, because these are all, like, of course, like promises that may sound good or bad to you depending on what you're thinking, but we don't have the details. We don't have the stats. Yes, yeah, Alex, you're saying it in chat too. We don't have like the data on how they'd actually roll this out. What's the legislation going to look like? How are these qualifications going to work? But obviously big statements, and that can be something that wins elections if you can rally enough support behind it. Obviously, the NDP are more heavily supported by young people, and that seems to be the NDP strategy as well, sort of diving into all the social media. Jagmeet Singh is the only federal leader, I believe, who has a TikTok account. So there are steps that we can make to make more education more affordable right now. Stop profiting from student debt. I guess that would be zero interest loans on student debt, but then will anyone ever pay it back if there's no sort of incentives to pay it back? As well as debt forgiveness. Forgive up to $20,000 in student debt. In the first year alone, this will wipe out 20% of student debt and help 350,000 borrowers save money every month. Also move away from loans and permanently double non-repayable Canada student grants. Okay, so doubling the grants people can get to go to school. You should be able to access that without feeling like it's a debt sentence. That's an interesting play on words. We'll make sure that young people can start out life without a crushing debt burden. Okay. All right, so interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Like obviously like really big statements, right? Again, we need more details before we can pass any judgment on all of this stuff. Yeah, Thomas, I see you saying so much stuff. Who pays for it? Let me show you this. This is what the NDP's plan is right now. I think it's right in here. They don't actually have any details on how they're going to pay for this stuff. But they say right here, yeah, okay. So just before this press conference that we covered today, this is from the Globe and Mail. Oh, we don't need that. During a technical briefing with reporters before the release of this document, a party official said they plan on working with the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer. That's the sort of the agency, maybe that's not the right word to describe it, that sort of explains to parliamentarians the way that numbers would work for different policies so that they can better inform their voting decisions. So the PBO, they say like, hey, we're going to give our plan to the PBO and have them do all the number crunching and tell us like, how much is this going to cost to implement their proposals. And to cover some of the proposed programs, only some, right? This certainly wouldn't cover all of the things they're talking about. We're talking about totally socialized or like a publicized education from like K to like graduate school, right? To university. Like that's like a 25, 28 year sort of education plan. It would be rather expensive. The party said it would bring in a 1% tax on households. Okay, so this is a little different than what they announced before, with more than $10 million. 1% tax on households with a wealth of more than $10 million. Is this like a 1% tax per year for people? Okay. A party official said it would bring in as much as $10 billion a year to then be invested in services. I think that might be optimistic, like on how much it would actually bring in. People who are extremely wealthy are also the best at working within the tax system, like oftentimes legally working in the tax system to avoid taxes, right? When you have that high of a net worth, it becomes more and more valuable to invest in accountants that can stop you from paying more and more taxes, right? Whatever you think of that, of course, that's a controversial thing, but it's the reality, right? Okay. Another revenue source would be a promised temporary COVID-19 excess profit tax that puts 15% tax on large corporations that recorded major profits during the pandemic. Again, another one of the NDP's talking points, being strong and strict on these on these like major corporations, right? That they feel like they aren't paying their fair share. Okay. Yeah, interesting stuff. And then so here's some other highlights. $10 a day childcare, 30-year mortgages. I want to read more on this actually. Because that's interesting. They have that in the States. Well, actually, they do have 30-year amortization. Wait, 30-year terms? Okay, maybe this is just the Globe and Mail article not using the right language, but this isn't talking about the 30-year amortization with the same 5-year periods that mortgages are right now. But a 30-year term typically means like how long the mortgage is locked in for. That's That would be a big deal. That's kind of what they have in the States. Here in Canada, you lock in a mortgage and you have to renew it, usually in 5 years. Of course, you can have different terms, but that's the standard, right? Every 5 years, you sort of flip over your mortgage. But if we had 30-year terms, you could lock in an interest rate today and lock in a payment amount today at a fixed rate and be paying that for the full 30 years, regardless of inflation, regardless of changes in interest rates, regardless of the fluctuations of the bond market, right? That's actually a bigger deal than if that's the case. Maybe we can find that in the document. Creating 500,000 units of affordable housing, guaranteed livable income, price cap on cell phone bills, and continuing wage and rent supports for small businesses. Let's see if we can find, okay, just because I'm gonna do this anyways, we'll keep the stream going. I'm gonna see if I can find that information on the amortization there. I've seen people just announce it's 30-year term. Okay, announced last year, but very hard to, a 30-year term, not just amortization, like a 30-year term. But he's saying by CMHC insured, right? Likely the 30-year term would be for like people who are putting down like over 20%, like an uninsured mortgage, right? So it'll be interesting. Okay. Huh. Interesting stuff. Let's see if, is that in the table of contents here? Okay, maybe I just am missing it. Do you guys see the housing here? Like, tell me what page it's on. Yeah, Alex H, give me that 30-year fixed. Yeah, that would definitely be ideal for even real estate investors, right? Being able to like predict how much you're gonna have to be paying and not have to have that fluctuate. Like if you can lock in like the 2% interest rates today for 30 years, it's like free money at that point, especially with inflation at the rate it is right now. Why wouldn't you take on all the debt you possibly could and put it into real estate if you can find like at least a cash flow neutral property? Let's see. Do you guys see it? Page 10? Oh my goodness. If it's like literally just on, oh my, it's literally the first one. Oh, that is rough. That is rough. Thanks, Snagglepuss. Okay. All right. Let's see what they're going to do here for housing and if they have the amortization details in here. Owning a home has become an impossible dream for too many Canadians. Finding a decent place to rent is out of reach. Everyone should have the right to a safe and affordable place to call home. Working people should be able to afford to live close to their workplaces, including in the hearts of our biggest cities. Young people should be able to stay in the neighborhoods they've grown up in, and seniors should never be forced out of the communities that they've spent their lives in. But for too many families, safe and affordable housing is increasingly out of reach, thanks to skyrocketing rents, demo evictions, or rent evictions, and ballooning home prices. The pandemic has only made things worse for people on the edge, with too many families struggling to make rent or mortgage payments during the crisis. Parents lie awake at night worrying about how they can afford the family home as costs keep going up but paychecks don't keep up. And a huge number of young people are being forced to give up on the dream of ever owning their own home. Canada is in the midst of a national housing crisis impacting every area of the country. Average rent is rising. People spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Canada is the fastest growing house prices in all of the G7. Families are struggling, worried and anxious. Liberals have neglected the housing crisis in Canada for far too long, turning their backs. Even with the modest new announcements to try to fill the gaps, the reality is the housing program is too small to make a real difference. I definitely agree with that. You know that if you've watched any of my videos on their new announcements. The Liberal government's telling Canadian families that they're just going to have to wait longer for help. NDP believe that it's time to help people now. We have an ambitious plan. Let's see what it is. A major part of the long-term solution to the problem is to ensure more affordable rental units built. Okay. After 6 years in government, the Liberal plan's inadequate. We want to create 500,000 new units of quality affordable housing. Again, this is more talking about rental housing, it seems. A lot of people are more fixated on wanting to own a home than wanting more affordable rental. All that, of course, is an issue as well. This will be achieved with the right mix of effective measures. This is an ambitious plan. Tell me what it actually looks like, though, please. In order to kickstart the construction of co-ops, social and nonprofit housing, and break the logjam that's prevented these groups from accessing housing funding, we're going to start up a fast start funds to streamline the application process, mobilizing federal resources and lands, okay, for these projects. They're not going to have to buy private land, I guess. Turning unused and underused properties into vibrant new communities. Also spur construction of affordable homes by waiving the federal portion of the GST/HST on the construction of new affordable rental units. A simple change that will help get new units built faster. Just this is a tax cut for development of rental units. So that's what that is. These measures will help address the housing crisis at the source, but we also need to make sure that families that are hurting get help now. They're going to provide immediate relief. What kind of relief are you going to provide? Let's see. While making affordable rental housing more available is critical, they believe that the dream of home ownership, okay, here's some details on home ownership, shouldn't be forever out of reach for Canadian families. That's why we'll reintroduce the 30-year terms to CMHC insured mortgages on entry-level homes for first-time home buyers, allowing smaller monthly payments, of course, because a 30-year term would also be amortized over a 30-year. Essentially, you're paying back the loan over 30 years instead of the standard 25, making your payment lower on a monthly basis. Also easier for the property to cash flow if you're investing or if you're doing what I do, house hacking, right? Living in a portion of your home and then renting out another portion of it or running it on Airbnb or something like that. We'll also give people a hand with closing costs by doubling the home buyer's tax credit to $1,500. That's still not going to cover the legal fees, but okay. For Canadians who are open to innovative paths, we want resources to facilitate co-housing, model co-ownership agreements, and connections to local resources, and ease access to financing by offering CMHC-backed co-ownership mortgages. Interesting. More people able to pool their money to buy a home. Okay, and actually like having that be financed by the public agency that actually does that, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Commission? Is that what the last syllable is, or the last one is? Okay. Big money investors are driving up the cost of housing. We want to put a 20% foreign buyers tax. Don't want any more money laundering. So probably like strengthen FinTrack rules, which fuels organized crime. Okay. So yeah, so I guess their plan is 30-year amortization, 30-year terms as well, making that more, maybe potentially more popular to take on a 30-year term. The interesting thing is, like, if you have a 30-year term, it's less likely that the interest rate is going to be as low as the rates are currently now, right? Because whoever's offering the 30-year term loan, right, meaning the interest rate never changes, well, they've got to take into account that they're never going to have a chance to renegotiate that rate, and likely they're going to only offer it at a higher rate. So whether or not people are going to actually choose to take that higher rate and lock it in and know forever for the next 30 years that they're, until their home's paid off, they're going to be paying the same thing. I think most people would probably opt for the lower interest rate and then potentially roll that into a 30-year term if interest rates are like on an upwards trajectory. Interesting stuff. And the co-ownership stuff, these are a lot of big promises. I want to see how this actually would pan out. Lots of interesting stuff. Yeah. Okay. So I think that we're going to get close to wrapping up the stream here. I'm going to dive more into this and make actually some sort of more refined content for you. So keep your eye on the page. If you haven't subscribed already, do so. Any last minute questions before we call this a day and before I get started working on those videos? Any thoughts, anyone? I like the foreign investment tax. Maybe Canadians will own Vancouver again one day. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some merit there. Canadians are moving to the U.S. Just like Prince Charles. You can never get yourself paid off to your grandkids. Is there for sure going to be a fall election? It hasn't been called. Freedom of culture. It hasn't been called yet, but that's largely believed that there's going to be some sort of snap election called in the next couple of weeks, so that the election would actually be late September or early October, I guess. But yeah, or I guess it would be probably mid-October. How long are typical campaign periods? But yeah, so nothing's called officially yet, but it's definitely expected by most analysts. Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, exactly. Not called, but clearly they're amping up for one. How do we implement a 50-year term in Canada? Do we have it anywhere? I don't think we have a 50-year term anywhere in Canada, much less a 50-year amortization, right? That would be incredibly low monthly payments if you had a 50-year amortization. What do you think about UBI, where every dollar you earn working at a job, you pay back 50 cents UBI? I mean that's interesting. It would disincentivize people from working at least a little bit because of that 50-cent payback. Whereas like a true UBI where you don't have to pay back anything, well, like any work you do above that UBI, like it wouldn't affect anything, right? So you'd still be incentivized to work and to grow your wealth. UK 50-year terms only. Okay, interesting, Alex. But yeah, I mean that's the way that the CRB works, right? Every 50 cents or every dollar you earn above like the $38,000 in income in the year, you have to pay back 50%. So they do already have like legislation that has that type of structuring in it. So yeah, definitely a potential idea. Yeah, then explain Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland. They all believe heavily in socialism, and they have some of the lowest debt, better living conditions, and are happier overall. I mean, yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to every kind of system. It's just a matter of thinking about how that would work in our country and sort of evaluating those pros and cons. Alex K says, think about how useless a college diploma will be if government pays for it. I mean, it depends on what it is, right? Like, I think that if people are incentivized to go into fields that are in demand, like certainly the skilled trades and many other fields, I think that it could be useful, because there could be some people that aren't going into certain fields because they feel like they have to spend too much on the education side of things, even though those fields are in demand. But if we think about like everyone like going into certain degrees that don't have much of a career path afterwards or highly competitive, then it gets a little bit more less valuable to have that degree. And we're even seeing that right now when we even have the high costs of going to school, right? So it'd be interesting to watch how that rolls out and how that affects things. Yeah, professional students who never work. Yeah, there's lots of people who just stay in academia because there's not like the high paying work. I mean, you just pray to get a professor's job. Freedom of Culture says, what do you expect for the fall housing market, GTA picking back up, going for a bull run, or stabilizing? It's tough to tell for sure. We did see the sales to new listing ratio go up, indicating it's going more into a seller's market than the trajectory that we saw when that sales to new listing ratio was going down, right? If the sales to new listing ratio goes down, that means there's less sales and more inventory. And I think it's like the direction that the housing market go is certainly a product of that ratio. And so we're seeing that there could be more, like, even though the sales numbers are down, the sales to new inventory, that's not down, right? So even though there's less sales happening, it's not as hot, not as quickly transacting, we're still seeing that it is a seller's market, and it could continue to go on that way. I think the biggest thing that's going to impact it is the changes to the quantitative easing programs from the Bank of Canada and a raising of interest rates. I don't think that anything is going to really truly make a big dent in housing apart from those factors. What makes you think? Okay, yeah. Government currently subsidizes and they're already less valuable. Interesting. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, like like how it is right now, in terms of subsidizing the degrees. I gotcha. Yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, well, I think on that note, we're going to wrap this up. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope that this stream has been valuable to you in some way. Thanks for tuning into these live streams. I have the chat up here, and so I'm like always reading it as we go through here, and I get to know your names, so make sure to keep on tuning in here, and I really get to know who's an OG really supporting on the streams. I appreciate all of you for being here. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon, because there's definitely some more content to make some videos about. So I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a great day, everyone, and I hope you have a good weekend. Tomorrow's Friday, right? Yeah. So enjoy that. All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.